You know someone like this. They'll drive 4 hours in the middle of the night because a friend called crying. No questions, no complaints, just keys in hand and engine running. But ask them to show up for a company team-building event? Suddenly they have a mysterious prior commitment that definitely existed before you asked. That's not hypocrisy. That's not laziness. That's Gen X loyalty. And it is one of the most psychologically fascinating things about this entire generation, because here's what nobody explains. Gen X doesn't have a loyalty problem. They have a loyalty filter, and that filter was built by decades of being burned by every institution that ever promised them something. Let's go back to the beginning. If you were born between 1965 and 1980, you grew up watching the adults around you get destroyed by the very systems they trusted. Your dad gave 25 years to a company, got a gold watch and a pink slip when the restructuring came. Your mom believed in the marriage your society told her would last forever. The divorce rate in the 70s and 80s told a different story. Your teachers told you the government was honest and trustworthy. Then Watergate happened. Iran-Contra happened. The AIDS crisis was mishandled so badly that people died while officials looked the other way. Over and over again, Gen X watched institutions make promises. And over again, they watched those promises get broken. Psychologists call this institutional betrayal. It's not just disappointment, it's a specific kind of psychological wound that forms when a system you were supposed to trust, a school, a government, a corporation, a church, fails you in a fundamental way. And research shows that institutional betrayal doesn't just make you distrust that one institution, it rewires how your brain evaluates trust entirely. For Gen X, this rewiring happened during their most formative years, which means by the time they were adults, the question was never, do I trust institutions? The answer was already no. The real question became, then who can I actually trust? And the answer they found was simple. People. Specific people. People who had shown up. People who had proven themselves in the small moments before the big ones ever came. This is where Gen X loyalty gets fascinating, because what Gen X developed wasn't a lack of loyalty. It was the most ruthlessly earned version of loyalty that exists. They don't give it freely. They don't give it to titles, uniforms, brands, or org charts. They give it to individuals who have passed an invisible test most people don't even know they're taking. Think about your Gen X friend. Really think about them. They probably have a small circle, not a big one, not a LinkedIn network they call friends, an actual circle. 3 people, maybe 5. And for those people, they would move mountains without being asked twice. That's not coincidence, that's psychology. Research in developmental psychology shows that children who grew up in environments with inconsistent adult presence, and Gen X was the latchkey generation, coming home to empty houses, raising themselves between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m., develop what's called selective attachment. They learn not to attach broadly, they attach deeply to the specific people who actually showed up. Because broad attachment in an unreliable world is just setting yourself up for repeated pain. So by the time Gen X was forming adult friendships, they had already spent years unconsciously sorting people into 2 categories, the ones who actually show up, and everyone else. And here's the thing that younger generations sometimes misread as coldness. Gen X doesn't tell you which category you're in, they don't announce it, they don't post about it, they don't have a conversation about the state of your friendship. They just quietly note whether you were there when it mattered. And they remember, for years, sometimes forever, that friend who showed up to help them move with zero notice in 1994, they'd still take a bullet for them in 2025. That manager who threw them under the bus in a meeting back in 2003, they will never fully trust that person again. Not because they're holding a grudge, because their brain cataloged it as data. This is actually connected to something neuroscientists call long-term potentiation under stress. Memories formed during emotionally charged moments, especially moments of betrayal or loyalty, are encoded more deeply than ordinary memories. They become reference points your brain uses for future trust decisions. For Gen X, who grew up in a high-stress, low-safety environment, this encoding happened constantly. Their trust map is detailed, precise, and extremely hard to update once it's written. Now let's talk about institutions, because this is where people misunderstand Gen X the most. When a millennial quits a job, there's often a whole emotional process: guilt, second-guessing, a long conversation with HR. When Gen X ghosts an institution, a company, a political party, a religion, a brand, there's no drama, there's just absence. One day they're there, the next they're not, and they feel almost nothing about it. Why? Because they never fully arrived in the first place. Gen X never merged their identity with institutions the way previous generations did. Their parents were company men and women. Their grandparents believed in institutions with a kind of religious devotion. But Gen X watched all of that fall apart in real time. So they kept a psychological distance. They participated, they did the work, but they never handed their loyalty over. They rented it. And the moment the institution stopped earning the rent, they walked. This also explains something about Gen X in the workplace that confuses a lot of managers. They will work incredibly hard. They will be competent beyond what's required. They will solve problems nobody asked them to solve, but if you try to inspire them with company culture, mission statements, or corporate values posters on the wall, they will stare at you with a flat affect that borders on disturbing. Because for Gen X, competence is the currency, not belonging, not brand alignment. If you're good at what you do and you treat them with respect, they'll deliver. If you're a mediocre manager hiding behind a job title, they will do their job and want nothing more from you. Not hostility, just distance. That selective loyalty shows up in politics too. Gen X has historically been the least party-loyal generation in modern American history. They vote based on specific issues, specific candidates, specific moments. The idea of being a lifelong Democrat or a lifelong Republican the way their parents were, that's psychologically foreign to them. Institutions don't get their loyalty automatically, not even political ones. And religion? Same pattern. Gen X quietly left churches in huge numbers starting in the 90s, not with protests, not with public statements. They just stopped going. The institution had broken too many promises, so the loyalty got redirected toward personal spirituality, toward individual meaning-making, toward the people in their lives who actually behaved like the values the institution preached but didn't practice. Here's the profound thing about all of this. In a world that's increasingly mediated by institutions, by platforms, by corporations, by governments with more reach than ever, Gen X's relationship with loyalty might actually be the healthiest model available because they never confused the map for the territory. They never mistook a brand for a human. They never handed their trust to a logo or a mission statement. They gave it to people. Messy, imperfect, real people who had proven themselves in actual moments that actually mattered. And in return, for the people who made it through that invisible filter, they offer something almost no one else can: unconditional, unannounced, unshakable loyalty. No post about it, no recognition needed, just presence, just action, just showing up at 2 a.m. with coffee and zero judgment, because that's what you do for the people who earned it. That's the psychology of Gen X loyalty. Not broken, not cold, not antisocial, just calibrated. Precisely, permanently, ruthlessly calibrated by a generation that learned the hard way exactly what trust is worth and exactly who deserves it. If this hit you somewhere real, subscribe. And if you want to go deeper into the psychology of the generation nobody talks about, the next video is waiting for you. Click it. You'll understand yourself, or someone you love, a little better.